Greetings to everyone, friends. Poland has been saying for years that it needs Ukrainian workers, that without them, factories and construction sites come to a halt, that Ukrainians are the foundation of the Polish economy. For example, those who lived in Poland back in 2014, 2015 or 2016 remember very well how positively Ukrainians were treated back then. At the same time, now we see a situation where you can easily get a 5-year deportation order just for catching a fish. And they keep fueling scandals around historical issues with new and renewed force, which we won't go into detail about right now, let's put it that way. And now you can hear attacks on Ukraine more and more often, or something along those lines. At the same time, there is a new article from the VNP publication, which was published on June 7, 2026. And it says that the number of Ukrainians in the Polish labor market is decreasing. Some are returning home, while others are moving to Western Europe. Vacancies are increasingly being filled by workers from Asia and South America. So it turns out that now Poland is systematically pushing Ukrainians out, while at the same time bringing in Filipinos and Colombians. And this is actually the paradox that for some reason no one talks about out loud. All of this is happening as quietly as possible. And actually, I would like to discuss this issue today and what it could really lead to. And in my opinion, at some point, this could lead to Poles saying, we'd rather have Ukrainians come to us than Filipinos or some Colombians. But unfortunately, by then it might already be too late. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with your friends, and make sure to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss new episodes. And let's go step by step. First, what information is verified by the numbers? According to data from the Polish ZUS, in the period of January to February 2026, the number of foreigners in the labor market increased by 9% to 1,291,000 people. In particular, the number of Ukrainians increased by almost 10 to 860,000 workers, right? These are those who work and pay taxes. So, formally, the number of Ukrainians is still increasing for now, but this is only part of the whole picture. Because despite the trend towards a decrease, citizens of Ukraine still make up the largest share of foreigners working in Poland. But the share of Ukrainians among all foreign workers has already started to gradually decrease. So, why? For one simple reason. Because other groups are growing much faster. The jobs that used to be mostly filled by Ukrainians are now increasingly being taken by other workers. Construction sites now have migrants from the Philippines, Colombia, India, and Nepal. And in Poland, there are already about 30,000 citizens from just Colombia and the Philippines working at the moment. There is no data on Indians or other nationalities. And here is what the CEO of Worksol Group, Michał Selective, says. He is someone who sees this entire market from the inside. Even after the war ends, many Ukrainians may face difficulties when returning to the Polish labor market. Employers who have already hired workers from other countries are unlikely to want to dismiss them just to rehire Ukrainians. So it's not just like a story about there being fewer Ukrainians. It's also a story about the fact that there are more and more representatives of other nationalities in Poland. And we see that usually these are people from societies where religion, language, culture, customs, and history are radically different from those of Poland. So, why do Ukrainians go to Poland at all? There are two main flows, completely different flows, and let's break them down. The first stream is migration to Western Europe. This is the main and most stable trend. For many, Poland has become a primary stop, not the final destination, because salaries in Germany, the Netherlands, Austria, and so on are 2 to 3 times higher than in Poland. The working conditions are better, social protection is greater, and no one tells you to go back to Ukraine. Due to the cooling of the Polish labor market, increased competition for jobs is expected, and there will be a shift from a shortage of workers to a strategy of retaining only key personnel. The Polish economy is slowing down. And it's slowing down right now, and qualified Ukrainians are the first to feel it. The second flow is about reasons actually related to the atmosphere in Poland, because if the first one is about the job sector, then the second is directly about the conditions people are living in now, unfortunately. Because here, the article in the GDP didn't mention it, but it's written in the daily Ukrainian reality for Ukrainians in Poland, right? We've already discussed this separately, but in March, for example, during a nationwide Polish police operation, among 147 detained foreigners, the largest group was Ukrainian citizens, over 60%. The second thing is deportations for minor offenses, like driving to Morskie Oko or catching fish where it wasn't allowed. So, actually, let's be honest, there are many more of these minor cases. This is not an exception, but a signal for everyone living in Poland. So, why? Because, in my opinion, this way they create an atmosphere of fear for Ukrainian men living in Poland. And it's a signal that if you want to stay in Poland, you have to do everything not to break even the smallest rules. So, because for any little thing you might break, you will be sent to Ukraine, and then you will be sent to the front. You can put the whole logical chain together yourself now. The third thing is that 43% of Poles have a dislike for Ukrainians. According to CBOS research, it's 26% as of last year. Growing hate crimes, the UPA scandal. All this creates an atmosphere where some people simply decide that it's worth leaving Poland and moving to other, more peaceful countries, where Ukrainians are treated like everyone else, and there are no showy deportations done in a highly publicized way. Now, actually, about the fact that Poland is currently doing two completely opposite things. Because on the one hand, it is driving Ukrainians out. There's anti-Ukrainian rhetoric, for example, from President Nawrocki, the Confederation Party, deportations for fishing or for taking photos at Morskie Oko, and further, support for excluding men from temporary protection, and more of this growing noise in the form of accusations against Ukraine, calling them Banderites and so on. This is basically what you can find under any Ukrainian content on the internet. That's on one hand. On the other hand, they are actively and systematically bringing in other people, Filipinos, Colombians, Indians, Nepalis. So, the decision of the Polish government to extend simplified access to the labor market for Ukrainians without the need for a separate permit seems like a completely pragmatic step to support the economy and compensate for the labor shortage. So officially, Poland still needs foreign workers, but unofficially, they are increasingly actively looking to replace them. Among those who have no issues related to Volyn, related to mobilization, and so on. So what is happening now? There is a kind of quiet replacement happening, so that Ukrainians who can be sent back to Ukraine are sent there, so that Ukraine can send them to the front, and the war does not spill over onto Polish territory. And in Poland, so that Nepalis, Indians, and so on work instead. And this is happening very slowly right now, and we can already see it. Meanwhile, there's also as much negative rhetoric toward Ukrainians as possible. The question that also comes to my mind is whether there is some kind of system to this. Is Poland deliberately using xenophobic rhetoric and restrictions to push out Ukrainians in order to replace them with a less problematic workforce, or not? There is no direct answer, but the pattern here is actually obvious. And actually, what can you say about this? Write right now in the comments what you think, as you've noticed yourself, whether the attitude towards Ukrainians and the attitude towards other nationalities is different now in 2026. Because practice shows that any offense, not a crime, just an offense, committed by a Ukrainian is examined under a microscope and spread across all social networks. If this offense is committed by some other foreigner, a person from another nation, then no one is even interested. Everyone is only interested in what Ukrainians are doing in Poland. Just a reminder, I made a separate video on this. Check it out on the channel. It came out the day before yesterday. About the fact that the Australian, just like the Ukrainian blogger, was detained in the territory of the Tatra National Park. But if the Ukrainian blogger drove in on an asphalt road to Morskie Oko and took a photo there, for which he got 5 years of deportation, then the Australian, he was detained on an ATV, right in the middle of the forest where his rides are strictly forbidden, and this severely destroys the ecosystem. So, what did he get for that? He caused much more damage than Havriliv, who in fact did not cause any harm at all. So, this Australian got a 2,000 zloty fine and a 6-month driving ban, but only on the territory of Poland. So, if he goes to Slovakia and does the same thing there will be no problems. And of course, he was not subject to deportation. This is yet another example of selective justice. So what should we actually do? First, if you are currently working in Poland officially and everything is fine, your position in the labor market remains strong, you are already integrated into Polish society, you know the language, and you have some social contacts. So, new migrants from Asia are going through the same process that you have already gone through. Your advantage is that you have been in Poland longer. Second, if you are thinking about moving to any country in Western Europe, it is a rational decision if you have a concrete offer. The salary is higher, the housing is better, and the working conditions are better. Then there are no problems, right? And third, if you are thinking about returning to Ukraine, the labor market in Poland continues to change. And if you are planning to return, for example, after the war, although that's, well, a complicated matter, but unfortunately or fortunately, there are also people like that who leave, go to Ukraine, and then after 3 months come back. At some point, there might be a problem that there simply won't be any work in Poland, and this will be primarily because Poland is now very actively bringing in foreigners from third countries outside Europe and unrelated to Ukraine. That's why we currently have this situation where Ukrainians who are already integrated in Poland are either being pushed back to Ukraine or they simply leave for other Western European countries themselves. Meanwhile, xenophobia toward Ukrainians is being intensified as much as possible. That's it. But at the same time, there is a quiet replacement happening with people from other cultures, other nationalities, and other religions. And let's see what this will lead to in the future. What do you think? Share in the comments. I look forward to reading your opinions. Thanks. See you next time.